Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tearing open a stack of sources to analyze a company that, it forms the literal foundation of the American economy.
Right.
And yet it remains largely invisible to the average person. If I asked you to name the biggest construction supply company in the U.S., you might guess a big box store, right?
You would probably say Home Depot or something.
But you'd be wrong.
And that's where we're going today. We are pulling back the curtain on Builders FirstSource. Inc. ticker is BLDR, a true behemoth of the U.S. residential construction and remodeling sector.
Yeah.
This deep dive is tailor-made for you if you're curious about how these seemingly traditional industries consolidate and, how sheer scale, when it's executed through a really clever corporate strategy, just translates into unstoppable market power.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a detailed corporate profile here, and the immediate takeaway for me is that this is not some small specialized firm.
Not at all.
This is a massive, dominant player. So, to set the stage, Builders FirstSource is a Fortune 500 company. It's publicly traded on the NYSE, and this is important, it's an S&P 500 component.
Which means it's one of the largest and most influential companies in the entire American stock market. It's a big deal.
It is.
So our mission today, it goes beyond just listing off their products.
Right.
Anyone can sell lumber. We're diving into the source material to understand the architecture of their growth.
How they built it.
Exactly.
Right.
Specifically, how they built this gigantic business in a relatively short amount of time. The story of Builders FirstSource is, it's a masterclass in aggressive strategic mergers and acquisitions.
And then what comes after.
Yeah. Followed by equally aggressive, highly confident capital management.
So the core fact we're working with, the one that defines everything else, is right here in the source material. It says Builders FirstSource is the largest supplier of building products, prefabricated components, and value-added services in the entire U.S.
And that's the key phrase.
We need to dissect exactly what that means and how they turn that status into, financial dominance.
Absolutely. When you see a company achieve that level of leadership in a sector that historically has been so hyperlocal and fragmented, think of the neighborhood lumberyard.
Right. Every town had one.
So, there's a fascinating corporate narrative driving this. This consolidation wasn't an accident. It was completely orchestrated.
So let's start with the basics then, the core foundation of this entity. For a company that operates on this, industrial giant scale, its history is surprisingly young.
That's what's so fascinating here. It's the speed of their ascent. The sources say Builders FirstSource was incorporated in March 1998.
1998.
Yeah. That means, as of the context of the sources we are analyzing, the company is only about 27 years old.
That's nothing.
It's nothing. You compare that lifespan to some legacy industrial names, and the velocity of their growth to S&P 500 status becomes truly remarkable.
It just suggests they either found an incredibly opportune moment for market entry or, and this feels more likely, they just executed a near-perfect consolidation strategy right out of the gate.
I think it's the latter.
And their operational hub is, of course, strategically located. They're headquartered in Irving, Texas.
A major logistics center.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Texas is a huge market for residential construction, obviously. But Irving also provides that central location for managing a nation-spanning operation.
It does. But we have to clarify their core identity here. Because when people hear building materials supplier, their mind usually goes to retail.
Like we said, Home Depot, Lowe's.
To think of those places where you can buy a single drill or, a few sheets of drywall. BLDR is operating in a fundamentally different sphere.
Totally different. The source material is very clear. They're operating purely on the B2B side, business to business. They aren't serving the DIY market. But the more crucial distinction is their dual role.
Correct. They are defined as both a manufacturer and a supplier of building materials. And look, this is not a subtle distinction. It's the absolute core of their strategy and their profitability.
Explain that difference.
Well, a pure supplier simply buys bulk items, lumber, shingles, windows, and then resells them at a markup. A manufacturer, which BLDR also is, takes raw materials and converts them into specialized, high-value components.
And that dual role, that's where they create their competitive moat. They aren't just distributing 2x4s, they're actually controlling a key part of the construction timeline in the process.
And if we look specifically at their offerings, the source highlights building products, prefabricated components, and these crucial value-added services.
So let's drill down on that. What does prefabricated components actually mean for a builder on the ground?
Okay, so think of roof trusses, which are the triangular support structures for a roof. Historically, those were often built piece by piece on the job site by carpenters.
Right, which takes a ton of time. It requires highly skilled labor, sometimes in, terrible weather, and it generates a lot of waste lumber on site.
Precisely. So BLDR, through its manufacturing facilities, produces these trusses and wall panels and floor systems off-site in a controlled, quality-assured factory environment.
So it's all standardized?
It's engineered to precision, delivered ready to install, and it requires far less time and labor on the construction site. This efficiency is, it's immensely valuable to their customers, the professional builders.
Because time is money.
Time is the most expensive variable in construction. That speed and precision allow builders to turn over projects faster.
So their market position is really defined by this capability. They aren't just selling a commodity, they're selling labor efficiency and, time savings.
And that leads directly to the key fact we started with. Builders FirstSource is the largest supplier of these specific value-added products and services in the entire U.S.
So they've leveraged this manufacturing capability to just completely differentiate themselves from every other distributor in the country.
They moved from being just a logistics partner to being an integral part of the building process itself.
And who are the beneficiaries of this massive operation? The customer base they target is pretty critical to understanding their reach.
Right. Their focus is extremely high level. New residential construction professionals and repair and remodeling professionals.
Not the guy fixing his own deck.
No. This means their core clients are the national and regional home builders, the D.R. Hortons, the Lenners of the world, who are putting up hundreds, if not thousands, of homes every single year.
So by focusing on those volume professionals, BLDR ensures continuous, massive sales volume that lets them maximize the efficiency of their, 550 locations?
Exactly. They are the backbone that enables high-volume housing development.
And to truly manage that kind of massive B2B relationship, you need a sprawling yet highly organized physical footprint.
Well, the operational scale is genuinely staggering. The sources note that they operate approximately 550 locations. Just think about the logistics involved there.
It's incredible.
That is 550 independent hubs. Some are lumber yards, some are manufacturing plants for trusses, some are specialized millwork centers, all of them coordinating inventory, manufacturing schedules, and delivery routes.
And those 550 locations are spread across 40 different U.S. states.
40 states.
That's 4/5 of the country's states operating under one umbrella. The challenge of integrating supply chains, inventory management systems, and local compliance across nearly the entire nation. It's just monumental.
It confirms their status as a national platform, right? They're capable of serving builders who operate across multiple states, and managing that footprint requires a huge human infrastructure.
Which brings us to their employee base.
Over 15,000 people employed throughout the USA. This number solidifies their position not just as a financial entity, but as a major force in the U.S. labor market, directly tied to the cyclical health of the housing industry.
So that's the foundation, that 27-year history, the 550 locations, the focus on high-margin, value-added manufacturing. Now we have to look at how that foundation translates into cold, hard numbers.
Right. And this section, it reveals the ultimate proof of concept for their strategy. Because when you move from being a fragmented local supplier to a national manufacturer, the resulting financial statements look less like a materials company and more like a high-margin industrial conglomerate.
This is where it gets really compelling. We've established the geographic scale, but the 2022 financial results, they just put a dollar value on that market dominance.
Okay.
Let's start with the top line.
Okay. The 2022 revenue was reported as $22,726,418,000 United States dollars.
Let's just say that out loud.
To be clear, that's over $22.7 billion in revenue in a single year. That figure is the definitive evidence of their largest supplier status.
When you look at $22.7 billion in revenue, you realize this company has successfully rolled up enough regional competitors and captured enough market share to essentially, dictate terms in certain segments of the supply chain.
Right.
But how do they handle the cost structure to generate meaningful returns from that enormous top line?
See, that's the critical insight. Pure distributors often have really thin margins because they're competing solely on the commodity price of lumber, which, fluctuates wildly.
That's all over the place.
But because Builders FirstSource includes those high-margin value-added services, the manufactured components we talked about, their margin structure is just superior. Their operating income for 2022 was $3,770,206,000 United States dollar.
Almost $4 billion in operating income. That gap between the revenue and the operating income, that's the direct result of having the vertical integration capability we just discussed.
It is. They're capturing the profit not just from reselling, but from actually manufacturing the finished, customized components.
They've basically internalized a huge chunk of the builder's job site labor cost and turned it into their own factory profit.
Exactly. And the final profitability figure is even more striking. Net income for 2022 was $2,749,369,000 United States dollar.
Nearly $2.75 billion in final profits.
Yep.
That is just immense profitability. It's a powerful indication that the massive, complex integrations they undertook were not only successfully managed, but they also led to enormous synergies and cost efficiencies across those 550 locations.
Absolutely. If the integration had failed, those numbers would be far, far lower, swallowed up by redundancies and integration costs.
For sure.
What this really demonstrates is the power of leverage. When you are operating a platform that covers 40 states and generates $22 billion in revenue, you gain huge leverage over every supplier, every shipping company, and every labor pool.
And that leverage allows them to drive down their input costs and maximize the premium they can charge for those time-saving factory-built components.
This success isn't just about selling a lot of stuff. It's about optimizing the cost structure of the entire operation.
Okay, let's shift our focus for a moment to the leadership steering this ship. Our sources identify Peter Jackson as the current CEO. But the corporate profile gives us a really useful transition point here, because the history of Builders FirstSource's leadership is, it's irrevocably tied to the history of their mergers.
That's a crucial connection to make. In a company that grows this quickly through M&A, the leadership structure is often a direct reflection of the latest and most critical integration efforts. The executive suite becomes a battlefield, or maybe more accurately, a complex negotiation zone, where the best talent from the combined entities is selected to move the organization forward.
And we'll see this later when we discuss the BMC merger. The leadership question was paramount, and it led to a significant transition where the leadership of the acquired rival was actually brought in to command the newly merged company.
Which is fascinating.
It tells us the board is ruthlessly prioritizing operational efficiency and smooth integration over, maintaining any specific internal legacy management.
It's a sign of a strategically disciplined organization. The financials prove the model works, but now we have to move to the engine itself. This massive platform, those huge profits, they didn't just appear by magic.
Right.
They were built through a series of increasingly daring and successful corporate maneuvers.
Okay, so if the $22.7 billion in revenue is the outcome, then the M&A strategy we're about to discuss is the process. Builders FirstSource didn't just wait for market opportunities. They created them by strategically consuming their competition and then vertically integrating key capabilities.
You can trace their path to dominance through three pretty distinct phases of acquisition. The first was the single massive step that launched them into the national big leagues.
And that would be 3.1. The landmark 2015 acquisition of ProBuild. This was the big bang acquisition, right? This is the one.
It absolutely was. When Builders FirstSource acquired ProBuild in 2015, this was a market restructuring event. ProBuild was a formidable rival. The goal here wasn't some niche expansion. It was pure horizontal scale.
Just get bigger.
It was about consuming the competition to drastically increase their national footprint and market share basically overnight.
So what was the immediate quantitative impact of this merger? What do the numbers look like?
The sheer size is breathtaking. The combined entity immediately boasted $6.1 billion in combined revenue based on 2014 figures.
Wow.
And just think, if you had been operating at a much smaller scale and then suddenly you nearly triple your size with a single transaction, the operational challenge is terrifying.
Oh, yeah. You inherit new debt, new systems, new management structures, and a whole lot of redundant locations you have to figure out what to do with.
That's the part that gets glossed over in the press releases. It's not just combining two revenue streams, it's merging two massive logistical operations. This acquisition could have crippled the company through debt and failed integration.
But it didn't.
Instead, it became the undisputed foundation for their next leap.
So they pulled it off.
They did. The source material confirms the success of the integration. The combined company continued this momentum, proving the synergy was real and sustainable. By 2018, the combined revenue had risen to $7.7 billion.
So a $1.6 billion increase in 4 years post-merger. That's the payoff.
That's it. It shows that the expanded geographic reach and the ability to leverage their new combined purchasing power allowed them to grow organically within that new massive footprint. They successfully digested ProBuild and used that scale to capture even more business.
So once they achieve that massive horizontal dominance, that national reach and bulk purchasing power, the strategy pivots.
Right.
They move from simply buying scale to buying specific high-margin capabilities. This is the shift to 3.2. Targeted vertical integration starting in late 2019 and early 2020.
This is where the strategy moves from big and bold to surgical and nuanced. They use smaller, targeted acquisitions to plug strategic holes and reinforce that high-margin, value-added capability that we know drives their profitability.
They were creating a defensible business moat.
That's a great way to put it.
So let's look at the first key example of this. In December 2019, they acquired Raney Components, LLC, and Raney Construction, Inc.
The acquisition of Raney, which is based in Groveland, Florida, was extremely forward-looking. The core strategic value was explicitly stated. It added vertically integrated capabilities, specifically off-site manufacturing of prefabricated components.
The trusses and wall panels.
Exactly. And value-added services across the crucial Florida market. Florida is one of the fastest-growing residential markets in the U.S. So by acquiring Raney, BLDR didn't just buy a supplier. They bought a factory that creates labor-saving, precision-engineered products.
It's like securing a crucial input. Off-site manufacturing insulates them from some of the volatility of job site labor shortages, and it keeps quality control high. So by bringing that in-house, they secure both the margin and the competitive advantage of speed.
And they understood that this acquisition wouldn't be complete without broadening the types of services they offer. And that led directly to the next targeted acquisition in January 2020, Bianchi & Company, Inc.
Bianchi & Company, located in Charlotte, North Carolina, was noted as a millwork supplier and install company. What's millwork?
Think doors, windows, molding, trim. It's the highly customized, detail-oriented part of the build that demands skilled installers.
Got it.
So by acquiring Bianchi, BLDR could now offer a supply and install solution. This makes them far more sticky with a professional builder. The builder only has to deal with one vendor, one contract, one point of contact for the entire millwork package, including the actual installation.
That's huge.
It significantly deepens the relationship and creates a massive barrier to entry for smaller competitors who can't offer that.
So we have scale from ProBuild, we have manufacturing capability from Raney, and then expanded service and install offerings from Bianchi. This three-pronged approach really set the stage for the consolidation event that truly solidified their market leadership.
Yes. 3.3, the mega merger. BMC Stock Holdings, 2021. If ProBuild was the launch, BMC was like achieving stable orbit.
I like that.
In September 2020, they announced the merger with BMC Stock Holdings. This was a combination of two major national players who had already executed similar aggressive growth strategies as their own.
And the outcome of this was clear. The newly merged company would operate entirely under the Builders FirstSource branding.
Which is a powerful signal. They weren't interested in a compromised brand or a co-branded name. They wanted to assert the singular identity of the dominant entity.
No question who was in charge.
Right. And the most fascinating element of this merger, beyond just the colossal size of the combined entity, was the post-merger integration process, specifically regarding the leadership legacy.
This is where it gets interesting.
This merger required a level of operational expertise that the board clearly recognized demanded specialized attention.
And the source material highlights that immediately following the merger in January 2021, the former BMC president and CEO Dave Flitman was named president of the merged entity.
The guy from the company they just bought.
Right. I have to ask, bringing in the CEO of the company you just acquired to lead the combined organization, what does that tell us about the integration challenges?
It tells us two things very, very clearly. First, that BMC had highly valuable operational infrastructure and talent that BLDR needed to preserve and leverage. They didn't want to break the toy they just bought. And second, that Flitman was likely the most qualified person to navigate the inevitable cultural and system clashes that follow such a large merger. The board was essentially saying, we acquired your business, but we respect and require your expertise to make the integration seamless and profitable.
It's an aggressive yet humble move.
It really is.
And this wasn't just some temporary gesture either. Just 3 months later, in April 2021, following a 90-day transition period, Flipman was named CEO of the entire company.
Which confirms it. The board's commitment to prioritizing integration and operational continuity above all else. The merger fundamentally changed the DNA of the C-suite.
It's a classic move in mature consolidation phases. You bring in the proven operator, even if they come from the acquired entity,
Right.
to ensure you don't lose the value you just paid billions for.
Exactly. So the M&A strategy ProBuild for scale, Raney and Bianchi for margin, and BMC for ultimate consolidation, it created this massive revenue-generating machine. And once that machine was built and stabilized, the focus shifted entirely to maximizing the return for shareholders.
And that's where the capital strategy comes into play.
That's the next chapter.
So if the acquisitions were the engine, the cash flow resulting from that massive scale is the fuel. Once the BMC merger was successfully finalized and the efficiencies began to bear fruit, the company transitioned from being a major acquirer to being a major investor in itself.
And this shift is such a critical piece of the puzzle. When management has proven they can grow externally through M&A, the next sign of maturity is proving they can manage the resulting cash internally, demonstrating confidence in future earnings.
Which brings us to 4.1, the importance of stock repurchase programs.
Right.
And this isn't some small-scale share dilution prevention. We are talking about multi-billion-dollar programs that send an incredibly clear signal to the market about the company's financial health.
The sheer scale is difficult to overstate. The company detailed the completion of $2 billion in stock repurchase programs that were initiated in 2021.
$2 billion.
Just think about the level of free cash flow required to execute a $2 billion buyback. It signals they had an immense amount of capital that was not needed for immediate operational expenses or debt servicing or even further large-scale M&A.
Because they had effectively captured the major competition already.
They'd done it.
So for the learner, let's quickly explain what a stock repurchase program actually does, because it's a direct method of returning capital to shareholders.
Sure. So when a company repurchases its own stock, it is literally taking shares out of the open market and retiring them.
Taking them out of circulation.
Exactly. And this achieves two primary objectives. First, it reduces the total number of outstanding shares, which mechanically boosts your earnings per share, or EPS.
How does that work?
Well, if your net income stays the same but the number of shares decreases, the slice of profit allocated to each individual share goes up, which makes the stock more appealing.
Okay, makes sense. What's the second objective?
Second, it signals massive managerial confidence. Management is essentially saying, we believe the best investment opportunity available right now is our own stock. It is undervalued, and we are willing to spend billions of our own cash to prove it.
And this wasn't just a single event. They completed $2 billion, and then they immediately accelerated the strategy.
They doubled down. The source material confirms that on February 18, 2022, they authorized a new $1 billion stock repurchase plan.
Another billion.
So when you analyze the total capital deployed towards this strategy, that's $3 billion dedicated to repurchases in a relatively tight time window right after the BMC merger. It just proves that the company successfully converted the paper value of their acquisitions into immense deployable cash flow.
It shows a highly disciplined approach to capital allocation. They aggressively pursued growth, and once that growth bore fruit, they shifted that aggressiveness into rewarding their existing shareholders.
And this leads us directly to 4.2, connecting the dots between the M&A history and this capital strategy. Why this sudden, torrent of cash being returned?
It's because the profitability they promised during the merger phase was actually delivered.
That's the whole thesis. The idea behind the ProBuild and DMC mergers was that combining operations would yield massive synergies, reduce costs, and most importantly, generate superior free cash flow because of their market leverage and vertical integration.
And the 2022 financial results, that $22.7 billion in revenue and the $2.7 billion in net income, that's the proof.
It is. That massive recurring profit provided the liquidity necessary to execute these multi-billion-dollar repurchase programs. The growth strategy and the capital management strategy are two sides of the same coin.
The M&A funded the cash flow.
And the cash flow funded the repurchases.
That also tells us something about their future outlook on acquisitions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When a company executes repurchases of this magnitude, they are implicitly signaling that they don't see another major high-value acquisition opportunity on the immediate horizon that would warrant holding on to $3 billion in cash.
So they've captured the market. They've won the game, so to speak.
Yeah.
They moved into a phase of optimization, not acquisition. They have built the platform, and now they are using financial engineering to maximize the value derived from that platform.
So the repurchase program is the ultimate expression of confidence that the scale they achieve through M&A is durable, efficient, and capable of sustained high-level earnings.
They essentially rolled up an entire fragmented industry and are now sitting on the cash generated by their dominant position.
It truly is a textbook example of a roll-up strategy in an industrial sector executed with speed, discipline, and remarkable effectiveness, creating a national, almost monopoly-like presence within 3 decades.
And their story demonstrates that the building supply industry, which is often viewed as slow and traditional, is actually ripe for the kind of sophisticated financial and operational strategy you might typically associate with, tech or finance giants.
As we wrap up this deep dive, the journey of Builders FirstSource is just a fascinating case study. We started with a name you might not immediately recognize and revealed a Fortune 500 company operating at the absolute peak of the U.S. construction supply chain.
Their story is a timeline of intentional scale building, from that 1998 incorporation to their S&P 500 status today, built on the back of massive integrations.
The ProBuild acquisition brought the initial horizontal scale.
And the BMC merger solidified their undisputed market leadership, all validated by that $22.7 billion in revenue in 2022. And that success was then reinvested not in more acquisitions, but in themselves through that robust and shareholder-friendly capital management strategy, pouring billions into stock repurchase programs.
So the critical takeaway for you, the learner, is understanding the power of strategic vertical integration. Builders FirstSource didn't just consolidate the market, they simultaneously changed their business model.
Right.
Moving from being a mere distributor of materials to a manufacturer of time-saving, high-margin finished components, they control the most efficient parts of the supply chain now.
And this leads us to our final provocative thought, something that connects these acquisition reports back to the physical world around you. We spent time detailing the importance of acquiring off-site manufacturing capabilities, evidenced by that 2019 acquisition of Raney Components.
Right. And historically, construction has relied on manual labor and site-specific assembly for components like roof frames and wall panels. This process is highly sensitive to labor shortages and, of course, weather delays. But if the largest, most dominant supplier in the country is also simultaneously the largest, most efficient manufacturer of pre-assembled, factory-built wall and truss components, essentially delivering a substantial part of the house frame ready to assemble.
What future implications does this dominance in off-site manufacturing have for the ultimate speed and cost of new residential construction across the 40 states they operate in?
That's the question.
Builders FirstSource is not just supplying materials anymore. They are industrializing the home building process. And if they can streamline construction and shave weeks off the build time, that leverage could fundamentally impact the velocity of housing supply.
Which could potentially affect everything from regional real estate markets to overall housing affordability in the coming decades.
It's a huge shift.
A shift that transforms the entire industry, driven by a company that started just 27 years ago. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into how Builders FirstSource built their financial and operational behemoth.
Keep digging for the story behind the numbers and the strategy behind the scale. We'll see you next time.